Hello, once again I'm Cosmic, and today we're going to be taking a look at third-person beat-em-up game Legend of Korra. For those unfamiliar with the franchise, Legend of Korra is part of the Avatar franchise, which is a Nickelodeon-produced TV series that combines Eastern anime and American cartoon styles. The Legend of Korra TV series is a sequel to the original 3-season show Avatar Legend of Aang, also called The Last Airbender in some regions. The Avatar franchise is one of my personal all-time favourite TV shows, particularly the original show with Avatar Aang. But anyway, back to the game. The game itself was developed by Platinum Games, who also developed the wonderful Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. The game was also published by Activision, and Platinum certainly have a good degree of pedigree behind them and a good amount of experience with third-person fighters, but will this licensed game live up to its name? The events in the game take place between the second and third season of the TV show. If you haven't seen it yet, I certainly would advise watching it, not only because it's an awesome bloody TV show, but because it makes understanding the lore and understanding pretty much anything that's going on in the game so much easier. You play, as you would expect, Avatar Korra, a young headstrong female avatar who has a knack for getting into danger. For those who don't know much about the world or what's going on, the Avatar is the only being who can harness all 4 elements and bend them to their will. They are protectors of the world and are supposed to maintain balance. I could prattle on all day about Avatar lore and how great the universe is, but let's get down to the main core of the game. Ultimately, there is only one main core gameplay element in Legend of Korra, and of course it's the combat. As the Avatar, Korra can summon the 4 elements to use at her will, and as in the TV show, Korra can switch between earth, water, fire and air to fight the multiple enemies she will face. Each style has different strengths and purposes. Air is great for crowd control and dispatching groups of enemies. Water is good for ranged attacks. Earth is short range but very powerful, and fire is fast and high in damage. Each element has different combination attacks that can be unlocked and learned as you level the style up through using it in fights. Unlike the show, however, you cannot switch styles mid-combo. You can only switch styles in between attacks. In terms of combos, I was very heavily disappointed with the lack of depth, especially from the creators of Bayonetta. Each style has only 3 or 4 unlockable combos, and this just severely limits the combat and makes the game very repetitive very quickly. It's actually quite sad that while the game does have a good solid foundation to become a good fighter, it feels as if the developers put in the groundwork but then didn't have the budget or the go-ahead to make anything with depth. The combat consists of 2 button attacks, being a normal attack and a heavy attack. You also have dodging, blocking, and on the rare occasion countering at the right time. Now I say on the rare occasion because the input system feels so sluggish, it's horrible. It's almost as if you're playing an MMO with a poor connection. The latency is awful. Buttons don't respond right away and feel very spongy, which can make it appear as if the guard button just works when it wants to. This is a huge oversight in any game, and in a fighter where timing is everything, it's nigh on unforgivable. The game even says right out at the start that a 360 controller for Windows is required for the optimal experience, but in my experience both controller or keyboard are spongy and unresponsive. Aside from the lackluster response time of the controls, combat is pretty fun. Avatar fans have longed for a time where they can bend the elements in a video game form, and it's relatively satisfying to hurl chunks of rocks at enemies. The issue is, while the novelty remains for a good amount of time, the lack of depth and sheer lack of length of the game negates any true satisfaction to be had. Simply button bashing in most cases has the exact same effect as actually learning the combos, which takes away any skill involved. The enemy AI as well is pretty much non-existent, and all enemies have a set number of moves depending on the type of enemy. Enemy variety in itself is lacking, as barring a few variations, you'll be sticking with the same bunch throughout the game. It feels so lazy. It's like the devs, instead of creating well thought out enemies and attacks, just said to each other, how do we do battle with the Avatar? oh, let's just give most enemies unblockable electric type moves. There's no creativity, no flair with enemies. Even boss battles are unremarkable with annoyingly long health bars and the same set moves over and over. In terms of progression, there's very little to be had. Most moves must be unlocked via the shop, which you can visit either in between levels or when you die. The store also contains health items and talismans which you can equip, which hold various effects. You can purchase items using spirit energy, which Korra collects from defeating enemies or smashing objects. Once you've purchased the items, you'll have to equip them, which is done by visiting Korra's home, which is essentially a very basic character screen. This can be accessed at any time, and from here you can assign items to buttons as well as look at your available combos. The game is, however, surprisingly difficult, but I remain unsure if it's actually intentional. The reason I say this is because 9 times out of 10 I died because the block button didn't respond, the enemies hit unfairly hard, or because, just to make things difficult, they just throw waves and waves of enemies at me. The balance of the game is just off, with enemies often just taking one hit just to wipe out half your health bar. Instead of coming up with intricate, inciting fights, every level just becomes rinse and repeat with different backdrops. Speaking of level design, levels are very linear, short and disappointing. While an array of familiar locations are available, including Republic City, and all the backdrops are faithfully representative of the TV show, the actual parts of the level that you can actually travel in are bland and uninspired. Some sections contain hidden areas that are blocked off by colour-coded walls, and only once you have the appropriate style of bending can they be broken. Occasionally between levels, you'll have a temple run style mission with Korra's trusty polar bear dog, Naga. It's all about moving between 3 or 4 lanes to avoid objects, with some jumping and ducking along the way. The whole thing feels like a cheap way to tack on some game time, and in my opinion, a less than appropriate way to implement Korra's trusty companion. These levels are filled with annoying deaths and become a test in patience rather than a fun sidetrack. The story of the game follows suit with its other aspects, that being disappointing. Instead of a gripping narrative that the franchise is renowned for, we are instead served up a B-movie quality story that, in my opinion, isn't even good enough for a filler episode for the TV show. At the start of the game, Korra loses all her bending thanks to chi blockers and a mysterious old man. You spend the majority of the game slowly gaining back your bending, element by element. What's even more infuriating is that by the time you have all your bending powers back in the game is actually almost over, so you have very little time to actually feel like a complete avatar. In terms of length, you can get through story mode in around 4 to 5 hours. Once you've completed the story, you unlock the Pro Bending League mode, and you can play through the story again with all your bending powers at the start. The voice acting in the game is really good, with all the actors from the series coming to play their respective roles. However, like I said, the story is bad, and thus so is the scripting. What little cutscenes there are look okay, but don't hold any real value to the narrative, mainly due to the fact that there really isn't any narrative. Alongside the voice acting is the music and sound effects, which are all fantastically true to the franchise and something that I was pleased to see. Overall, the game is a disappointment in almost every aspect. It's not the game the franchise deserves, nor is it representative of what Platinum can actually produce. What it does provide, however, is a glimmer of hope for the future of the franchise in video game form. Yes, this game lacks depth, length and story, but it's a solid foundation to build upon. It gives me hope that a fantastic Avatar game can be produced with the right budget, skill and time, and I certainly would like to see another Avatar beat 'em up, and I would also like to see the franchise expand into other genres, particularly possibly an RPG game. It would be so great because as a franchise there's so much you could do with it in video game form that doesn't even have to revolve around a particular avatar. You could just get a group of firebenders, earthbenders, etc together and go through an RPG story. That would be great. In terms of this game, I certainly wouldn't particularly recommend it at full price. I don't think it's executed well enough to justify the price, especially with the length of the game. And I'm not saying that I'm against short games, because I'm not, but short games need to be good, and this one just isn't. I certainly would, if you're an Avatar fan, a Legend of Korra fan, do pick up the game at some point, but possibly wait until it's on Steam sale. And that is Legend of Korra. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and do like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.